Congress actually pushed back on the president's own health care plan, eventually passing something, but he seems to be tied up there as well. While we need to remain vigilant, and I agree with you, we must remain humble about the possibility of it not ever being able to happen here, that we're somehow beyond all of this. Can't you look back at the last 120 days and say there are several parts of our system that have actually checked out quite well?
I would agree with that, but with a very important proviso. The system doesn't work like a machine. The system is us. So when Americans say the institutions are going to protect us, my response is, ask not what the institutions are going to do for you, ask what you can do for the institutions. So insofar as Congress or the courts, or especially I would emphasize the press, have helped, it's been because people in these institutions have been aware of the lessons of the past and have tried to get out front. When people went to protest the Muslim bans at the airports, it was because they understood the logic of politics like that and got out front. History is a way for us to think the consequences through. Yes, sir.
Would you also agree that the one thing we have learned that is chilling is that so much of our constitutional republic, of our system, of what Madison and Hamilton put together, depends on having a chief executive, a president who operates in good faith. That perhaps it is too dependent on that fact when you have a president that can appoint an attorney general, can hire and fire an FBI director with absolutely no oversight.
The main lesson that we have from 20th century history and the collapse of democracy and the overreach of executives is that it's important not to see moments like this as normal. And as you say, it's important not to imagine that executives will always behave normally. The chief lesson is you have to recognize moments when the actions of citizens matter more than other moments, and that you only have a few months or a year at the beginning to react fast. As you say, some of us have done that. You can't count on checks and balances to work on their own. They have to be pushed and nudged along.
So, Graeme, let's talk about the meeting that the president had that drew so much controversy, where he allegedly shared classified information with Sergei Lavrov and with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the U.S. He said he was doing it because he was asking Russia to step up its efforts in the fight against ISIS. What is the impact of all this sort of Russian chaos around the White House on that effort?
Well, specifically with this piece of intel about an infiltrator that was allegedly in ISIS. I mean, we have known very little about what's gone on in the inner circles of ISIS, in ISIS's core territory. It's been sort of a roach motel for a couple of years where people have gone in and not come out. So to have this drawn up into the chaos and some of that kind of intel sharing exposed to the world means that a very important piece of cooperation in the anti-ISIS fight is now something that our allies can't trust us to be a fair partner in. That's a huge loss.
Talk about how difficult it is to get human intel within ISIS.
Yeah, the people who have come out of ISIS so far, they've been low level. They haven't been important. They haven't been in the planning circles of attacks like the one that is supposedly being hatched against airlines going to the United States. So to have someone who's actually there is a source of intelligence that is invaluable and perhaps even irreplaceable.
Can you talk about the impact on Israel, one of our greatest allies, of course, if this intel, in fact, did come from them, that the president would share it so loosely with somebody who does not share our interests around the world? What does that mean to that relationship with Israel?
I think it's not just Israel, but Jordan. Jordan has been very important in providing intelligence about ISIS. And within Israel, there are political elements that are very sympathetic to Trump. But now that there is also within the intelligence establishment of Israel a knowledge that sharing is not necessarily a safe thing to do. So there will be rifts within Israel about what kind of cooperation with the United States should go forward.
Professor, there's a cable clock, there's a coastal clock that people operate under, but there's a country clock. And in the country at large, it seems there's a relative indifference because people are busy with their lives to what is going on in Washington. How much of that do you think is geared or revolves around the fact that we no longer teach history and civics as well as we used to?
I think that's tremendously important. So I just got back from spending a week in Ohio, where I would say more and more people are actually concerned and the clocks are beginning to line up. What we don't have is a sense of the way the institutions are supposed to work. We've lost that because of civics. And what we also don't have is a sense of what the possibilities are, because we've lost history. After 1989, we said history was over, everything has to proceed towards liberal democracy. What we're seeing around the world instead is a rollback of democracy now. And some of the things that roll back democracy, like the fake news and the attacks on truth, have reached us. We need to be able to learn from people abroad. We need to be able to learn from the past. The past actually gives us protocols for how we can react day to day so we can get our clocks aligned again.
So, Professor, what would reverse this course that you clearly are concerned about, that we've seen over the last 4 months? How can the country change? How can the country react in a way that becomes constructive and stops it on this path?
I think the key thing is what you say, that it's not all about Mr. Trump. It's about the country. Rather than being overwhelmed by the bad news every day, we have to have daily actions. The very first one is don't obey in advance. Understand that what's happening is not normal. Number 2 in the book is support institutions, whether it's the press, whether it's the courts, whether it's a labor union. Number 10 is very important. Believe in truth. We have to try to figure out what's going on. We have to believe that there's a common set of facts which will allow us to act together regardless of our political views. Without this, it's very hard to resist the overwhelming spectacle of the day-to-day.
We're looking at that list on the screen right now. Graeme, I want to ask you about your piece in The Atlantic. It's titled His Kampf, which focuses on Richard Spencer, a well-known white supremacist who actually you knew in high school. How different is the guy we've come to know today from the guy you knew in high school?
I've known him since 8th grade. We were chemistry lab partners.
Really?
And I would not have guessed in 8th grade that he would be the most prominent white supremacist of my generation. He's a completely different person. I mean, he was a B student. He was a 50th percentile student in every way, athletically, academically, and otherwise. And at some point along the way, he actually perhaps even learned too much history, specifically German history, and became really enamored with it in a way that is reflected in, I think, the intellectual predecessors whom he claims, and his style.
How did he rise? Why do we even know who this guy is?
For a long time, he was in Montana running a website called AlternativeRight.com. And of course, now we all know the term alt-right. It was one that he didn't quite coin, but he definitely brought popularity. And for a long time, he was cultivating a group of followers that eventually metastasized and is now inflicted on the consciousness of everyone in this country.
It's a fascinating read in The Atlantic from a guy who's known Spencer since the 8th grade, as you said. Joe?
Hey, Professor.